I'm Ellie Cohanim with JBS, delighted to invite you to join me for a conversation with Jack D. Hidary. Jack Hidary is a hugely successful entrepreneur in the fields of finance and technology. He's received recognition as a global leader of tomorrow at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and currently sits on the board of Google X Labs and the X Prize Foundation. Currently also on the Advisory Council for the National Renewable Energy Lab, and was a founding member of the Clinton Global Initiative, among a long list of volunteer board affiliations, too many to enumerate. Many of our viewers in the New York area will also know Jack Hidary as a recent candidate on the independent line for New York's mayoral race in 2013. So it's really my pleasure to be able to introduce Jack Hidary to our audiences. So Jack, you have been asked questions before about the disruptive economy that we're in. I would venture to say that you're a disruptive personality, someone who wants to make big changes in the world we live in. If you agree with me on that, tell me a little bit about the changes that you'd like to make to our world, and how far along are you?
Ellie, this is a time where we do need to make major changes across our society, and so it is time for disruption. Let's take education, for example. In education, we know that K through 12 needs major overhaul, major transformation. You look at New York City, for example, in our New York City public schools, 40% of kids are dropping out. In private schools, in the Jewish day schools, again, we need to help our kids prepare for the jobs of the future. When you look at the jobs that are coming up, they're not the same jobs as 10, 20 years ago. And so when we look at either the Jewish day schools or public schools, major changes are needed. The old way was memorization and testing. We can't go forward with that kind of paradigm. We need to change that. Give people the skills, give kids the skills, for example, of challenge-based work, problem solving, working in teams, understanding technology, understanding how to use technology to do business. These are the kind of skills that are not being taught in schools today that we need to start teaching. So major disruption needs to happen in education right now. Another area of disruption is in how we consume and use energy, how we power our cars, how we power our homes. Traditionally, we've been using fossil fuels for that. That's not going to be sustainable going forward. And also, it's not really healthy for us as humans, inhaling all the emissions from all these different kinds of fossil fuel activities. Instead, what we have now is the possibility of a major disruption. Looking at solar, for example, solar has come down 80% in price in the last 5 to 7 years. And that's dramatic. That means that in many states across the US, solar is not just a good thing to do, it's actually the economic thing to do. It actually beats out other forms of energy to power your home. When it comes to cars, for example, we're in for a major disruption in the next 10, 15 years. Traditionally, we've powered our cars with gasoline. But actually what many people do not know is that our first cars, the first cars to roll off the line 100+ years ago, those were electric. Those were actually using battery. In fact, one of the early presidents in the early 1900s had electric cars, and the taxis in New York City about 100 years ago were electric taxi cabs. So now we're coming full circle 100 years later, but the technology is better and more powerful, and now we have an example of Tesla, a car company that has come out of nowhere, built over the last 7, 8 years, and now it's producing a car that people really want, that is sexy, that looks great, and it actually gets 250 miles for one charge. Those are the kind of breakthroughs and disruptions that we really need. In the next 5 to 10 years, I predict that the cost of an electric car will come down dramatically, and more people will say, you know what, that makes sense for me, because, again, not just because it's good for us, but because of the economics of it. So to fill up an electric car only costs 60 cents a gallon, compared to $3 or $4 a gallon with gasoline. So it is going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight, but I do think that kind of disruption is really important for us. But the third disruption, maybe even the most important disruption, is in entrepreneurship itself. The American dream is always, like my family and many of the families in our communities, coming to this country with nothing, as my family did, and then realizing the American dream of becoming successful, building businesses here in the United States. And America is such a land of opportunity for that. My own family came here more than 100 years ago, my great-grandparents with my grandparents as children, and we've been able to work hard and make some success in this country. But too many people are not participating in that American dream. And so the disruption that we really need now is a disruption in entrepreneurship, a disruption in who's participating in the wealth creation of our country. Right now, it's too narrow a sliver. When you look at all the different people out there and the kinds of activities they have, more people could be part of entrepreneurship. And that doesn't mean just starting a tech company. Yes, if you want to start a tech company, that's great. And right now, we're in actually a space that it's an incubator. It incubates, just like an incubator will incubate a baby born. This incubator incubates new companies that are born, and we incubate them here, and they go on to become larger companies. And so these incubators now, which have popped up all around New York City, have popped up all around the country, these is a critical way to bring in new kinds of entrepreneurs. This particular incubator that we're in is specifically focused on women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses. These are the kinds of businesses that are being incubated in this space, Grand Central Tech, that we're in right now. But there are also many other kinds of incubators as well. We need to open up the doors of entrepreneurship. This is, and by the way, when somebody starts a company that's successful, it doesn't take away from somebody else. That's the beauty of entrepreneurship. It's not a zero-sum game where somebody gains and then somebody loses. In entrepreneurship, the whole pie gets bigger. So then when you create a new company called Facebook, and it's a massive, massive, massive success, creating a new social network, I can then create a new company on top of Facebook that, say, serves ads on Facebook. So one person's success leads to more success. This is the lesson we've learned now about entrepreneurship. But right now in America, too few people in our own community and too few people in America in general are participating in this very, very important endeavor. Entrepreneurship is critical not just because it creates a lot of wealth, but because it creates new technology, new advances in medicine. This is how we get breakthroughs for cancer, for heart disease, for diabetes. This is how that happens, through entrepreneurship. In fact, a study just came out this week demonstrating that where do jobs come from? If you ask most people on the street, where does a job come from? Most people would say, well, the large companies. That's really where most of the jobs are. You know, it's the GEs of the world and the IBMs of the world. That's where most of the job creation. That's actually not true. That's actually a misconception. It turns out that more than 85% of the new jobs come from businesses that have 10 people or less.
It's an interesting statistic.
Yeah, the kind of businesses here in this incubator.
Jack, you're a highly successful tech finance entrepreneur. You have international platforms to speak whenever you want. And yet you recently threw your hat in the ring to run for mayor of New York City as an independent. Tell me what motivated you to do that. Do you believe that government is the way to affect change?
Well, I think that we actually need many, many tools in the tool chest. If we're going to make disruptive change in our education system, in entrepreneurship, in the use of energy, in all these different areas, we need many different tools because these are big uphill climbs. These are massive, massive tasks. We need the private sector. I work every day in the private sector, creating companies, being an entrepreneur, mentoring other entrepreneurs, and that's a critical component. But we need to partner with government. We need to make sure that our government officials, our leaders, are up to speed, literally, on the new technologies, up to speed on the new ways of bringing education. And that's very, very critical. So I entered the race really to bring some new ideas into the race, to make sure that we talked about the transformation of education, to make sure we talked about entrepreneurship. I went to more than 70 different communities around New York City. It was an amazing journey over the course of 4 or 5 months to go and visit all these different communities. We are one of the most diverse cities on the planet, if not the most diverse. There's more than 500-600 languages spoken in New York City. The Jewish community itself here is diverse. And I went to visit more than 40 different synagogues, 40 different Jewish communities around New York City. This was an eye-opening area because, again, I come from Brooklyn. I come from a very strong Jewish community in Brooklyn, but there are many other Jewish communities as well throughout the city. And it was great to go to these Jewish communities, speak in their synagogues, talk to them about what is going on in education, in our private schools, in our Jewish schools, and in our schools in general. And what are the opportunities for our young people? When you ask families in the Jewish community, what are some of your concerns? One of their chief concerns is, what will be the opportunity for my children? And what will New York City look like 10, 20 years from now? What will the safety look like? And, crime has come down tremendously in New York City. It's been a big success story here. How do we make sure that continues to happen so that we can feel safe and we can build businesses and build families here in New York City? But second, what are the opportunities for jobs and for new businesses for our children? That's a question that I was answering again and again and again in every single Jewish community. And Jewish communities in New York City want to remain vital. They want community centers. It's not just about a prayer service in terms of a shul, but it's also about the community-centered activities, social activities, physical fitness. Like we saw at 92nd Street Y, now we see more community centers opening up across the whole city. That's one of the things that transformed my own community growing up in Brooklyn. Growing up in Brooklyn in the 1970s and then 80s, we had major, major crime issues. And many people thought of leaving New York City at that time. Many families did. But when we built our community center, it's now called the Sephardic Community Center, with the help of the city, with the help of the UJA, with the help of many other Jewish communities, all coming together, and ourselves chipping in quite a bit, all coming together, that's what grounded the community. That's what brought the community back together. And so these kinds of social services for the needy who come over and do not have jobs right now, helping them not just with immediate food as we do, but also helping them to get a new job. And so these so-called angel funds, these funds that are microfinance funds, giving people loans anonymously and allowing them to start their new business. In fact, what we've seen very successfully is people mentoring other people to get into the very business that they're in. These are people helping people to become competitors, and yet they're doing that. And that's been a hallmark of the Jewish community, and that's something that we need to encourage, not only in the Jewish community, but in many other communities.
Jack, I'm so glad that you are mentioning the community that you grew up in. So for our viewers who may not know, Jack grew up in the Syrian Jewish community in Brooklyn, New York. And it's a community I admire tremendously for being tight-knit, for having really great, strong family values, for taking care of each other, like you just described with angel funds and other ways. What I found, though, is that the Syrian community can be sometimes very traditional, very tight-knit, have very strong social mores. For example, expectations of religious observance, at what age people get married, going into the family business. Did you find yourself, as you were growing up, to be somebody who was going to play by that community's rules?
I really enjoyed growing up in the Brooklyn community. It was a fantastic place to grow up. We got really the best of both worlds. I was able to really see firsthand role models like my parents, my grandparents, my uncles and aunts around me, people who worked hard. Everyone around me had started a small business. Seeing role models all around me of people who not only working hard to create their own businesses, but also spending so much time volunteering in the community. That's what was really, really revealing.
So your official biography describes your grandfather peddling on the Lower East Side, and I imagine then your father established his business a little bit more solidly, and then we get to you, Jack, who is an incredible entrepreneur. So I just want to talk a little bit about your early career. In 1995, your first venture was a tech company called EarthWeb. You led it through 3 rounds of successful funding, and then eventually to an IPO in 1998. Your IPO in 98 was the largest first-day return in NASDAQ history. Jack, how old were you at that time?
When I took my company public, I was 30 years old, exactly. Yeah, just 30 years old. So it was a very exciting time to build a company, bring on institutional investors, large funds that examined our company, did diligence on our company, and decided to invest. So this wasn't just raising money from friends and family, although we did, and we had great support from our friends and family. This was also getting institutional money into our company and building our company. One of the most challenging parts of building a company is not the business itself, it's the people. It's to make sure you get great people aboard. It's to make sure you can retain those people. Because when there is a great surge of technology companies, those other companies want to have great people too. And so they might poach people from you. So how do you retain the greatest people? That's one of the key challenges I learned as an entrepreneur. And so I really evolved. I really learned a lot over those years in terms of, I'd grown up in a milieu of small business. I had worked as a kid in my family business in the warehouse in Brooklyn, packing boxes and shipping boxes. And so I got a hands-on view of what small business was like. But this was another story altogether, because this was about a technology company that had to grow very, very quickly in a matter of 2-3 years. And very quickly with EarthWeb, we realized that we needed to add a key component of a career site. And so we were able to buy a small site called Dice, and we were able to take that from just $2-3 million in revenue to more than $60-70 million in revenue in a matter of a year or two, and to really recognize that IT professionals, technology professionals, really needed a place to go to find their jobs and to find their consulting gigs. And this, today became a great company. And so it's great to see that something that you started so many years ago is still doing well.
I can imagine it must be a real source of achievement and inspiration for you. Jack, but there's been so much that you've done since then, and I think one doesn't even know where to start and end. I would say one project that you have gained a lot of fame and recognition for was serving as an architect for Cash for Clunkers. Which was also fabulously successful as a policy of the United States government. When you first started to think about Cash for Clunkers and speaking to the Obama administration about it, did you ever think it would be as successful as it turned out to be?
Well, we knew at the time that the country was going through a major economic crisis, and we needed to do something to make sure that we had continued jobs in that sector, as well as in other sectors. We knew that, for example, dealerships were going under at a tremendous rate. There used to be more than 23,000 dealerships in America, and that number was coming down very, very quickly, car dealerships. We also knew that the mileage per gallon of the old cars on the road was terrible, yet people were holding on to those cars, again, because they didn't have the money to get into the new and more efficient cars. It also became actually a safety issue. So when you look at the old cars, they didn't have airbags. They didn't have the modern safety type of features, such as crumple zones to protect the passengers in the case of an accident. There are more than 40,000 people who die every year on our roads in the United States of America. And this is something that, again, is partly due to the lack of airbags and the lack of good safety features in some of the older cars that are on the road. So we knew it was both an economic issue of jobs, and also for the pocketbook of those people who have those old cars. They're spending so much money on gasoline because they're in cars that get 7, 8, 10, 11 miles per gallon. And so we knew that it was imperative to find a way to start swapping out those old cars for new and better cars. And it turns out that when we implemented that program, we were responsible for about 3/4 of the GDP growth of those quarters that the program was going in place. And so the amount of GDP infusion because of this one program was absolutely incredible. But it was only meant really as a booster program. Cash for Clunkers is the kind of policy that is not something that's meant to be a 3-4 year policy. It's meant to be a quick hit so that you can actually boost the economy through a crisis period. And that's exactly what occurred. We were able to help the car companies, help the auto dealerships weather that particular storm, and they were able to get back on their feet and then get back on track. So that was a success there, but it also followed on from learning that I had here in New York City. When I worked with David Yaski. He was my co-author on a program to change all the city's taxi cabs from the old style Crown Victorias, which get 11 miles per gallon, to the new hybrids today. So when you go around New York City today, you'll see the majority of the new taxis are all hybrid taxi cabs. These are all cars that are getting 25, 30, 40 miles per gallon. When you see a Prius taxi cab out there, you see a Camry hybrid, Nissan Altima hybrid, they're getting 35, 40, 45 miles a gallon. That's savings in terms of the pocket of the taxi driver, because they're the ones who have to pay the gas. But it also means for all of us, we can keep the price of taxis down, because now the whole cost of the system is lower. But back then, before we passed that law, it was the law in New York City that you basically had to get a Crown Victoria. That was the only car you can get, and you had to pay so much in gas because it only got 11 miles per gallon. So we were able to break that monopoly. And to Ford's credit, because Ford is the one who made Crown Victoria, they came back into the market with the Ford Escape, which is a hybrid and a great car, and now many of the cars on the road, many of the taxi cabs on the road are Ford Escape hybrids. But now there's competition, and that's what we want. There's Nissans, there's Ford Escape hybrids, we want competition, and that's a great thing.
Jack, you've done a lot of work on innovative projects, and right now you're on the board of Google X Labs, as well as the X Foundation.
X Prize.
Sorry, the X Prize Foundation. What do you see as the exciting new technologies that are emerging, and what would you like to see? What do you want someone to invent?
Ellie, this is a moment right now where we can have major disruptive change for the positive. We can have technologies that will radically transform whole industries. And we're seeing that happen right before our eyes. When it comes to what we call moonshots, or these are major programs to have new technologies, now we have the tools with X Prize as an example. X Prize is a nonprofit that puts up $10 to $40 million per prize as an incentive to bring competition out for major change. And so rather than just giving out grants to say, hey, would you try to make a new technology, we put up 10, 20, $30 million, co-funded by many different sponsors, and that leads to competitors, sometimes dozens, sometimes hundreds of different teams, all competing for that money to make that change happen. Coming back to education, we want more and more kids to think about jobs and careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. STEM is what we call it. And it's so critical that they go into those positions now, because we're going to, right now, the average age, life expectancy in America is 79 for men, about 81, 82 for women. That's predicted to go up to about 89 or so for men, 91, 92, 93 for women. And so this is going to be an age where people can live a long time. We really want to tackle things like heart disease and diabetes and cancer. These major diseases, we have to get a better handle on them. We need more breakthroughs. And so at X Prize, at Google X, these are the kinds of things that those organizations think about. How do we make major breakthroughs? Energy is another area that we already discussed. Self-driving cars, this is something that people may have heard about as something from the future, but actually I've been in a self-driving car. I've been driven.
How was it?
Down the highway at full speed, going down in the self-driving car. It was a very smooth experience. It was on a real road, not on a test road, and it detects all the cars around us. It detects the various barriers and on-ramps and off-ramps, and knows what the speed limit is. It's very aware of its surroundings. And ultimately, that's going to be a better driver than a human driver, because when you look at the accidents in America today, 3/4 or more are due to human error. And so people fall asleep, and now one of the major issues on our highways is people, of course, texting. We don't realize how this technology is affecting us, and so we're probably better off letting the car drive us instead of us driving ourselves once these systems are perfected. But having seen the technology myself, I can tell you that we're now on the precipice of major change.
Jack, the tech sector seems to be one that's growing tremendously in our economy. How do you see tech interacting with the rest of the U.S. economy?
That's a great question, because actually, we used to call it the tech sector, but now every company is really a tech company. When you think about an airline, what is an airline today? Yes, it does have airplanes, and yes, it flies around, but fundamentally, it's got to be driven and managed by technology. Fundamentally, it's got to be driven and managed by technology. How do we reserve now? Most of us do not make a phone call to reserve an air ticket. We're now using online apps, we're using websites, we're using various other sites even to find which airline to go to. So these are aggregators that allow us to find which are the best prices out there. And so airlines now have to really compete because they know their prices being compared on a second-by-second basis. So that's on the reservations. In terms of the management, coordinating all the pilots and the flight attendants and making sure all that happens and where the planes are, that's another huge technology challenge. And now the airspace is getting more and more crowded, so we have to really make sure that safety is number one. So throughout the process, technology is really the driver of a company like an airline. But the same thing for the maker of clothing, for a retail store. I think retail is in for major disruption. And today, obviously, we've seen the impact of Amazon. We've seen the impact of downloading of books and downloading of music and downloading of movies. Where's Blockbuster? Gone. Where's Borders Bookstore? Gone. Where's Tower Records? Gone. These companies were major presences. Growing up in New York, you always remember Tower Records. You always remember all these different great stores. They're all gone. And so what's going to happen now? Well, I think that one of the next major shifts is going to go from web e-commerce, where you can go on Amazon and order something and 2 days later it comes. And yes, there are a lot of products that you can wait 2 days to get. But we as humans, very often we want something right now. Or for our business, we need something right now. Well, there's a whole generation now of new companies that are now beginning, that have just gotten funding in the last year, last 2 years, that are now hitting and impacting retail. That means that you can take your phone, push a button, and then within 30 minutes, within 45 minutes, that product is right here. That's going to be a major disruption in the next 3 to 4 years.
Jack, you know, I think for many of us in our generation, you're an icon for us. You're brilliant, having studied a combination of neuroscience and philosophy. You've done interesting things like attending Burning Man festivals and other great things like that. You have a real social media presence. You just ran for mayor. You're a tech entrepreneur. Do you see yourself as an icon in that way?
My aim, my goal is hopefully to inspire change, to be a catalyst. And I've tried in everything I do to catalyze others to join me in these kinds of movements of change. And so there's one lesson I've learned early on is you can't do anything yourself. If you try to do a major change yourself, you won't succeed. So I think that the kinds of things that I'd like to do going forward again is what we have done in the last few years, to be a catalyst, to be a mentor, to inspire others to start companies, to inspire others to start new kinds of movements that could really make massive change.
So Jack, I hear you in theory. What does that mean in principle? Are we gonna, in reality, can we expect you to run for mayor again? What's next on the horizon for Jack Hidary? Because I think many of us are watching and waiting.
Well, for sure, I'm going to be starting new companies. I'm starting a new company right now in the tech sector. I'm mentoring a lot of companies in the tech sector. That's, my core passion is to make sure we can continue this tremendous movement of entrepreneurship. And I'm very engaged in so many communities out there to help inspire others to start their businesses. I think that's one of the core focuses of my activity for the next few years. And I think that the more people we can have in that, the better. I think we can also take a global view of that. But let's talk about Israel. Israel has more tech startups on NASDAQ than almost any other country besides the United States. And it's a great success story because Israel, the natural resource there is the ingenuity of the Israeli people and the ability to take the skills, often learned, for example, in the army, training in the army, in the military, to translate those skills into a positive force of change in entrepreneurship, technologies that are there for cybersecurity, other kinds of technologies for digital interfaces, as well as medical technologies and other kinds of telecom technologies. And so there's a wide range of entrepreneurship coming out of Israel. When you look at Google and the fact that Google has an 8-story campus in Tel Aviv, that's a great signal. When Intel goes to Israel and creates a major research center and comes out with all kinds of new microchips in Israel, that's again another vote for Israel in terms of a place for tremendous research and innovation. Right now in New York City, we're about to see in the next year or two the flourishing of the Cornell Technion Institute. And this is going to be a new university in New York City that's going to pump out tremendous number of engineers, co-taught by Cornell and Technion faculty. That's the kind of relationship we want to see between Israel and the United States, jointly working on these kinds of innovations. So it's so exciting to me every time I'm in Israel to see that, but also to forge those relationships between our community here in America and in Israel.
Jack Hidary, this has been a fascinating conversation. I thank you so much for joining us on JBS, and I hope you'll join us again soon.
Thank you. Thank you much, Ellie, for having me.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV on JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.